Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be unpacking something that I think a lot of us can relate to, that feeling of being a fraud, even when everyone else thinks you've got it all figured out.
Yeah, imposter syndrome.
Exactly, imposter syndrome. And, it's one thing to feel it, but it's another thing when it starts to affect our work and our leadership.
Oh, absolutely.
In fact, our source material for today points out that imposter syndrome can actually hinder decision-making, reduce confidence, and negatively impact team dynamics and organizational performance. That's a pretty big deal.
It's huge, yeah.
So it's not just in our heads, it can really impact how we show up as leaders.
Right, and I think what's so interesting about imposter syndrome is, we often think of it as this very internal, personal struggle, but it has a way of kind of leaking out, and affecting how we interact with others, how we lead, how we make decisions.
It's like this constant loop of self-doubt playing in the background.
Exactly.
Like, am I good enough? Am I really cut out for this?
Yeah, and imagine like having to make a decision as a leader.
Oh, God.
With that going on in the background.
Right, and then you overwork because you're trying to compensate for that feeling of not being good enough.
Absolutely, which just perpetuates the cycle.
Exactly, so it becomes this like vicious cycle.
It really does.
And what's fascinating is that our source material talks about how our brains can actually get stuck in these negative patterns.
Yes, and this is where I think it gets really interesting, because it's like our brains are running the wrong code. Even when we have evidence to the contrary, even when we have successes under our belt, that inner voice is still saying like, nope, not good enough.
Ugh, so frustrating. So if our brains are running the wrong code, is there a way to rewrite it?
I think so. And that's actually what's really exciting about all of this, is that there are actually strategies that we can use to overcome these thought patterns.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It's not about becoming someone else. It's really about reclaiming your authentic self and leading with more confidence.
So how do we do that? How do we hit that rewrite button?
Well, it starts with awareness, I think. Cultivating self-awareness, but not just focusing on our weaknesses.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging our strengths as well.
So not just beating ourselves up about what we're not good at.
Exactly. Because often what happens, especially with imposter syndrome, is we get so caught up in what we're not that we forget to celebrate what we are.
That makes sense. It's like we're choosing to only see those low light reels instead of the highlight reel.
Yes, exactly.
So how do we shift that? How do we start highlighting the wins more?
I think one really powerful way to do that is to actually keep track of our accomplishments, even the small ones.
Okay.
Like keep a success journal. Think of it like a highlight reel of your professional life.
I love that.
So each time you achieve something, no matter how small, you write it down.
So you're taking the time to really internalize those wins instead of just brushing past them.
Because we have a tendency to do that.
Yes, we do.
So, it's really about giving ourselves permission to actually feel good about our accomplishments.
Which, let's be honest, can be hard when that imposter voice is in your ear.
It can be.
Yeah.
But that's why I think celebrating those successes, no matter how big or small, can be such a powerful antidote to imposter syndrome.
So we're talking about shifting our perspective, retraining our brains to focus on the positive. But what about those negative thoughts that just keep popping up?
Yeah, those can be so tricky.
Right, the ones that say, we're not good enough, not experienced enough.
Right, like you're going to get found out.
Yes.
You're a phony.
Yeah.
Those are tough.
Yeah.
But I think the key is to challenge those thoughts head on.
Okay.
Don't let them spiral. Counter them with evidence.
So it's like we have to present a case to ourselves.
Yes.
Against that imposter syndrome.
I love that. I love that analogy. Absolutely.
Okay, so it's like a courtroom drama in our minds.
Totally.
We've got to come with the receipts to refute the case.
Yes. So for example, let's say you're about to tackle a big project.
Okay.
And that inner voice starts whispering, you're going to fail, you're in over your head.
Yep.
Instead of letting that doubt consume you, challenge it. Remind yourself of your past successes, the skills you've developed, the challenges you've overcome.
It's like we're fighting fiction with facts.
Yes.
Instead of buying into that story that imposter syndrome is selling us, we have to rewrite the narrative. Okay, so we've got to acknowledge our accomplishments, challenge those negative thoughts. What else can we do? What else can we add to our imposter syndrome toolkit?
Well, I think another really important tool to add to that toolkit is seeking support, building a network that you can rely on.
Oh, so we don't have to battle this alone.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. And, I think there's this misconception, especially for leaders, that we need to have all the answers, that asking for help is a sign of weakness.
Right.
When in reality, the most effective leaders are the ones who are willing to, surround themselves with brilliant people.
Yeah.
Who can offer different strengths, different perspectives.
Totally. It's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Exactly. Building that strong network, whether it's mentors or coaches or even just trusted colleagues, can make all the difference. Because those are the people who can provide that guidance and encouragement.
Yeah.
And a fresh perspective when you need it most.
It's like having your own personal cheer squad, just like reminding you how awesome you are.
Yes.
And that it's okay to not be okay. Right. Like, we don't have to do everything ourselves.
Exactly. And that actually ties into another important strategy, which is embracing vulnerability.
Oh, okay. Vulnerability. That can be a scary word.
It can.
Especially when we're talking about leadership. Like, we're almost conditioned to project this image of confidence, even when we're not feeling it. So how do we embrace vulnerability as leaders without feeling like we're losing control or that we're, exposing ourselves too much?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think embracing vulnerability isn't about oversharing or, trying to appear weak.
Right.
It's really about just being authentic, right? Like acknowledging that you don't have all the answers and being open to learning from others.
So it's more about like creating a safe space where everyone can just be human, even when things get tough.
Exactly. And, it's amazing how much vulnerability can actually be a strength,
Okay.
because it humanizes us as leaders.
Right.
And it helps build those stronger connections within teams. Because when we as leaders are willing to show up authentically, flaws and all, it gives other people permission to do the same.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that creates such a more, authentic and supportive environment.
It's like we're building genuine connections, based on trust and understanding.
Yes, absolutely.
Instead of just like, this facade of perfection.
Right.
Okay, so we've got build our support system, embrace vulnerability, anything else that we can do to really like solidify those defenses against imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think the final piece of this puzzle, and it's a really important one, is connecting with your values and purpose.
Okay.
Really understanding what motivates you, what gives your work meaning beyond just titles and achievements.
So it's like getting clear on our why.
Exactly.
Like that driving force behind everything that we do.
And I think, when we are deeply connected to our values and purpose, it gives us this sense of direction. This grounding, especially in those inevitable moments of self-doubt, right?
Yeah.
Because it allows us to kind of measure success, not just by external validation, but also by our own internal compass.
I love that. It's like creating our own definition of success. That's not dependent on what other people think. Exactly. And when we have that clarity, when we're clear about our values and purpose, we're less likely to get caught up in comparisons.
Right.
Less likely to seek validation from others. We can just show up authentically as ourselves and make decisions that we know are aligned with our core beliefs.
So it's like connecting with our values and our purpose. It's almost like this anchor that keeps us grounded and steady, even when those waves of self-doubt come in.
Exactly. Because it's about recognizing that our worth is not defined by, our accomplishments alone,
right?
But by, the values that we embody and the impact that we have on the world around us. This has been so insightful. Like, we've really gone from like unmasking that imposter to like equipping ourselves with this whole toolkit of strategies to really kind of combat it. But, it's not just about feeling better, right? It's also about becoming more effective leaders.
Absolutely.
So how does conquering that imposter syndrome actually translate to better leadership? What changes when we start leading from that place of authenticity and self-belief? So we've covered a lot of ground here, really digging into how to tackle imposter syndrome head on. But I'm curious, does this apply even if someone's not, in a corner office? What about those of us who maybe don't see ourselves as the leader type?
Yeah.
Does this still matter?
That's such a great question. And it's something I'm really passionate about, because here's the thing. Leadership isn't about job titles or, fancy corner offices.
Right.
It's about influence.
Okay.
We're all leaders in our own way, whether it's at work, at home, in our communities.
It's like that saying, leadership isn't a position, it's a disposition.
Exactly. And the strategies that we've been talking about today, owning your successes, challenging those negative thoughts, building that supportive network, those are tools that can help anyone show up with more confidence and authenticity, no matter what their role might be.
That's really empowering. It's like we all have that inner leader just waiting to emerge.
I love that. Yeah. And sometimes that inner leader might start with a whisper,
Okay.
like urging us to speak up in a meeting or chase after a goal we've been putting off. But the more we listen to that voice, the stronger it gets. And it really can propel us towards our full potential.
I love that. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've really gone from unmasking that imposter to equipping ourselves with this toolkit of strategies to combat it. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what's one thing you wish more leaders understood about imposter syndrome?
That's a great question. If there's one thing I could emphasize, it would be the power of creating a supportive environment.
Okay.
Where it's safe to talk about these experiences. Imagine a workplace where instead of suffering in silence, people felt comfortable saying, hey, I'm feeling a little unsure of myself here. Can we brainstorm together?
Yeah, so it's about normalizing the conversation around it.
Yes.
Making it okay to not have all the answers all the time.
Exactly, because let's face it, none of us do, right? And I think when we create that culture of openness and support, we break down the stigma and we create a space where everyone feels seen and heard and empowered to grow.
I love that. It's like a rising tide lifts all boats.
It really does.
Well, this has been such a great conversation. So many valuable insights.
Thank you.
And actionable strategies that we can all take away and, hopefully start implementing today.
Yeah.
But before we sign off, is there a final thought you want to leave our listeners with? Something to ponder as they navigate their own leadership journeys?
I would love for you to just take a moment and reflect on a time when you achieved something truly remarkable. A moment where you felt really proud of yourself. But then that pesky imposter voice might have crept in, trying to downplay your success, trying to tell you, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, or anyone could have done that. And my challenge to you is this. How could you approach that situation differently now?
Okay.
What would it look like to really own that accomplishment, to silence that inner critic with the evidence of your own brilliance? Because remember, you are capable of amazing things.
Yes, you are.
So go out there and embrace your full potential.
I love that. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us for this incredible conversation. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Thank you for connecting with us here at Touchstone Publishers. Please join our group Essential Leadership Skills and share your leadership knowledge with us all.